There are some summers that feel like they last forever. You can close your eyes years later and still feel the sticky heat on your skin, hear the distant chime of an ice cream truck, and smell the chlorine from the public pool. It's the summer of scraped knees and whispered secrets, of shared popsicles and promises of lifelong friendship sworn under a canopy of stars. In the mid-1990s, a film came along that perfectly captured the magic and melancholy of a summer like that. It was called Now and Then, and for a generation of young people, it was more than just a movie. It was a mirror. In that film, 4 young girls navigate the bumpy road to adolescence during one pivotal summer in 1970. Among them was the good girl, the sweet, naive, and endearingly sheltered Chrissy DeWitt. With her perfectly coiffed hair, her love for Seagram's wine coolers, which she thought was just fancy soda, and her unwavering belief in the rules, she was the heart of the group. The actress who brought Chrissy to life was a talented Canadian girl named Ashleigh Aston Moore. With her expressive eyes and brilliant comedic timing, she stole every scene she was in. She seemed destined for a bright future, another promising face in the vibrant constellation of 90s child stars. And then, like the fleeting summer the film so beautifully depicted, she was gone. She didn't fade away. She vanished from the public eye completely, leaving behind only the memory of that one perfect performance. Years later, news would surface that was so shocking, so profoundly sad, that it seemed impossible to reconcile with the sunny image of the girl we knew on screen. This is not just the story of what happened to the girl who played Chrissy in Now and Then. This is a much deeper, more complex, and ultimately more human story. It's a story about the deceptive nature of appearances, the immense pressure of youthful fame, and the private battles that are so often waged in silence, far away from the camera's eye. It's the story of Ashleigh Aston Moore, a life of brilliant promise that ended in the darkest of shadows, a cautionary tale that still haunts the legacy of one of the most beloved coming-of-age films ever made. To understand Ashleigh's journey, we must first immerse ourselves in the era that shaped her. The mid-1990s was a fascinating time for pop culture and for young actors. It was the peak of the TGIF era on television, a time when family-friendly sitcoms and dramas created a seemingly endless demand for talented young faces. The celebrity ecosystem was different then. It was pre-internet, pre-social media. Fame felt bigger, more mysterious, and perhaps more overwhelming. The line between a public persona and a private life was easier to draw, but the pressures were no less intense. For a young Canadian actress, breaking into the American market was a significant achievement. Ashleigh Aston Moore was born in Sunnyvale, California, but she was raised from a young age in British Columbia, Canada. It was there, in the vibrant Canadian film and television industry, that she got her start. Canada in the 90s was a hub of production, often dubbed Hollywood North. It produced its own unique content, while also serving as a frequent filming location for American projects. This environment provided a fertile training ground for a generation of young Canadian talent. Ashleigh began her career at the tender age of 4, appearing in commercials. By the time she was 10, she had landed a significant role in the acclaimed Canadian fantasy series, The Odyssey. The show was remarkably dark and sophisticated for a children's program, a surrealist adventure about a boy in a coma whose dream world mirrors the challenges of the real world. Ashleigh played Donna, a tough and resourceful member of a group of kids navigating this strange landscape. It was a role that showcased her range early on. She could be vulnerable, but she could also be fierce. The series gained a cult following and demonstrated that Ashleigh was more than just a pretty face. She was a serious young actress with palpable talent. This experience, along with guest spots on popular American shows filming in Canada, like Northern Exposure and Madison put her on the radar of casting directors in Los Angeles. The mid-90s was also a golden era for the coming-of-age film. Movies like The Sandlot, My Girl, and A Little Princess explored the joys and pains of growing up with a sincerity that resonated deeply with audiences. These films weren't just for kids, they were nostalgic touchstones for adults, reminding them of their own formative years. It was into this perfect storm of cultural trends that the script for Now and Then landed. Written by Marlene King, who would later create Pretty Little Liars. The screenplay was a deeply personal story about female friendship. It was semi-autobiographical, imbued with a sense of authentic nostalgia that set it apart. The project quickly attracted an incredible lineup of established female talent to play the adult versions of the main characters: Demi Moore, Melanie Griffith, Rosie O'Donnell, and Rita Wilson. Finding the perfect young actresses to play their 12-year-old counterparts was crucial. The chemistry between the four girls had to be perfect. Christina Ricci, already a rising star, was cast as the tough-talking Roberta. Thora Birch, known for her role in Patriot Games, was cast as the adventurous Teenie. Gabby Hoffman, another seasoned child actor, was cast as the introspective Samantha. The final piece of the puzzle, the sweet and sheltered Chrissy, was the most challenging to cast. They needed a girl who could embody innocence without being bland, who could be funny without being a caricature. When Ashleigh Aston Moore auditioned, they knew they had found their Chrissy. At the age of 13, Ashleigh was cast in Now and Then, the role that would make her famous and forever link her to the iconic summer of 1970. The film's production was a unique and immersive experience. The four young actresses spent the summer together, not just on set, but off set as well, forging a bond that mirrored the one their characters shared on screen. They lived in the same apartment complex, had sleepovers, and explored the small Georgia town where the movie was filmed. This wasn't just a job, it was a real-life summer adventure. In a rare behind-the-scenes interview from the set, a bright-eyed Ashleigh spoke about the experience with infectious enthusiasm. "It's a great part," she said of playing Chrissy. "She's so particular. Everything has to be a certain way, and she's so naive about everything." Ashleigh had a keen understanding of her character's comedic potential, but also her underlying sweetness. Chrissy was the worrier of the group, the one who packed for every conceivable emergency, the one who was horrified by talk of boys and French kissing. Yet, she was also fiercely loyal, the moral compass who held her friends together. One of the most memorable and revealing scenes for Chrissy is the infamous pudding scene. After a fight with her friends, Chrissy sits alone, methodically preparing a chocolate pudding snack, her face a mask of quiet determination. When her friends arrive to apologize, she refuses to speak, instead offering them a bowl of the perfectly made pudding. It's a moment of brilliant physical comedy, but it's also deeply revealing of Chrissy's character. When faced with conflict, she retreats into order and domesticity. Ashleigh plays the scene with a subtle mastery, conveying a mix of stubbornness, hurt, and a desperate desire for reconciliation, all without saying a word. The on-set camaraderie was palpable. The director, Leslie Linka Glatter, fostered an environment of collaboration and friendship. The older actresses, particularly Demi Moore and Rosie O'Donnell, took the young girls under their wing, offering advice and support. In a later interview, Gabby Hoffman fondly recalled the bond they all shared, describing it as a genuine sisterhood. "We were all going through puberty together," she said. "It was a very intense summer, and we were really there for each other." This sense of genuine affection is the magic ingredient that makes Now and Then so enduring. The friendship on screen feels real because, in many ways, It was. When the film was released in the fall of 1995, it was met with mixed reviews from critics, many of whom dismissed it as overly sentimental. But audiences, particularly young women, felt differently. The film was a surprise box office hit, and it quickly achieved cult status. For a generation of girls, Samantha, Roberta, Teenie, and Chrissy were not just characters, they were archetypes. Every group of friends had a Chrissy. She was the responsible one, the one who followed the rules, the one who was a little bit behind the curve but had the biggest heart. Ashleigh Aston Moore, through her heartfelt and hilarious performance, had created an icon of 90s girlhood. Following the success of Now and Then, Ashleigh's future in Hollywood seemed assured. She had proven her talent on a major stage and was now a recognizable face. She made a few more television appearances, including a notable guest role on the popular show Touched by an Angel. It seemed like the natural next step would be more films, more high-profile roles, a steady ascent into stardom. But that is not what happened. In 1997, just 2 years after the release of the film that made her famous, Ashleigh Aston Moore quit acting. At the age of 16, she walked away from it all. The decision was, by all accounts, not entirely her own. In a later brief interview, Ashleigh explained that her parents had asked her to step away from the industry. They wanted her to have a normal life, to focus on her education and experience a regular adolescence, away from the pressures and scrutiny of Hollywood. It was a decision rooted in love and concern, a desire to protect their daughter from the potential pitfalls of child stardom, a path littered with cautionary tales. For Ashleigh, who had been acting since she was a small child, it was a profound and jarring shift. One day she was a working actress, and the next she was just a high school student in British Columbia. This is where Ashleigh's public story largely ends, and the private, more obscure chapter of her life begins. For years, she was simply the whatever happened to girl from a beloved 90s film. She enrolled in college, and for a time it seemed she was successfully navigating the transition to a life outside the spotlight. She was no longer Chrissy DeWitt, the famous child actor. She was Ashleigh, a young woman trying to find her place in the world. But the transition from child star to private citizen is rarely a simple one. For many, acting is not just a job, it's an identity. To have that stripped away, even for well-intentioned reasons, can leave a profound void. The structure, the validation, the sense of purpose that comes with working on a set is suddenly gone, replaced by the mundane realities of everyday life. For a teenager, this can be a deeply disorienting experience. The details of Ashleigh's life after acting are scarce, pieced together from fragments of information and the memories of those who knew her. It is known that she struggled. The cheerful, confident girl that audiences saw on screen was masking a deeper vulnerability. The pressures of her past, combined with the challenges of forging a new identity, began to take their toll. Those who were close to her in her later years speak of a young woman who was bright, funny, and deeply compassionate, but who also battled with inner demons. She struggled with depression and eventually with addiction. This is the most difficult and painful part of Ashleigh's story. It forces us to look beyond the nostalgia and confront a devastating reality. The story of a child star struggling with addiction is, tragically, not an uncommon one. The list of young talents whose lives have been derailed or cut short by substance abuse is heartbreakingly long. This is the central controversy of Ashleigh's life, not one of scandal, but one of systemic failure. It raises profound and unsettling questions about the entertainment industry's responsibility to the children it employs. Are we, as a culture, doing enough to prepare child actors for the psychological aftermath of fame? When the cameras stop rolling and the applause fades, Who is there to help them navigate the complex transition back to a normal life? Ashleigh's story suggests that even with loving parents and the best of intentions, the psychological impact of early fame can be a heavy burden to bear. The loss of identity, the feeling of being a has-been at an age when most people are just starting to figure out who they are, can create a fertile ground for depression and self-destructive behaviors. Ashleigh's struggle was a private one, but it is part of a larger, public conversation that we are still grappling with today. Her story is a powerful argument for the need for better mental health support systems for young performers, both during and after their time in the spotlight. The final years of Ashleigh's life were a quiet struggle, known only to her family and close friends. Then, in December of 2007, the story took its final tragic turn. On the night of December 10th, Ashleigh was found unconscious in her apartment in Richmond, a suburb of Vancouver. She was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. She passed away at the age of 26. The official cause of death was ruled an accidental overdose, reportedly from a combination of pneumonia and bronchitis medication. But later reports and family statements would confirm the tragic reality that it was an overdose involving heroin. The news of her death was a quiet tragedy, reported in local Canadian newspapers but largely missed by the mainstream entertainment media at the time. It wasn't until years later, as the internet's obsession with 90s nostalgia grew, that fans of Now and Then began to search for information about what had happened to the cast. When they discovered the heartbreaking truth about Ashleigh's fate, a wave of collective grief and shock spread across online communities. The sweet girl who had represented the innocence of childhood had met such a dark and premature end. It felt like a betrayal of the happy, sun-drenched memories the film had given them. The historical significance of Ashleigh Aston Moore's story is twofold. First, it has irrevocably changed the way we watch Now and Then. The film is no longer just a sweet, nostalgic trip down memory lane. It is now imbued with a profound sense of melancholy. When we watch Chrissy DeWitt on screen, with her wide, innocent eyes and her hopeful outlook on life, we can no longer separate the character from the tragic fate of the actress who played her. Her performance has become a time capsule, preserving the image of a bright, talented girl frozen forever at the cusp of a future she would never get to have. The film has become an unintentional monument to a lost life, a powerful reminder of the fragility of youth and the devastating impact of addiction. Secondly, Ashleigh's story has become a crucial part of the ongoing conversation about the dark side of child stardom. She is often mentioned alongside other young actors who died tragically, like Jonathan Brandis, Brad Renfro, and Dana Plato. Her story serves as a powerful cautionary tale, a stark reminder that behind the smiling faces on our screens, there can be immense pain and struggle. It forces us to confront the human cost of our entertainment and to ask more critical questions about the environment we create for our youngest and most vulnerable performers. Her death, though a private tragedy, has had a public impact, contributing to a greater awareness of the mental health challenges that can accompany early fame. What can we learn from the life and death of Ashleigh Aston Moore? We can learn that appearances are often deceiving, that the brightest smiles can hide the deepest pain. We can learn that the journey from childhood to adulthood is perilous for everyone, but it is uniquely challenging for those who have to navigate it under the harsh glare of the public eye. And we can learn that addiction is not a moral failing, but a devastating disease that can affect anyone, regardless of their past successes or future potential. Her story is a tragedy. There is no denying that. A life of immense promise was cut short, and that loss is immeasurable. But her legacy does not have to be defined by its tragic end. Instead, we can choose to remember the light she brought into the world, however briefly. We can honor her memory by being more compassionate, by being more aware of the private struggles that others may be facing, and by continuing to have the difficult but necessary conversations about mental health and addiction. Ashleigh Aston Moore deserved more time, more chances, more summers. But in the one perfect summer she shared with us, she created something that will last forever. And for that, we can be grateful. We're done for today. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, smash the like button, comment below, and hit subscribe for more great content coming your way soon.